and also opening a physical incubation co-working space in Atlanta, in the United States.
Wow, that's amazing. What are you doing?
Hello everyone, my name is Brad Yasar and I'm the CEO and co-founder of EQIFi. EQIFi is a DeFi platform powered by a licensed and regulated bank.
Amazing. So I lost my sleep in DeFi in 2017 when I think sushi and all these things started. I mean, we've seen a big story coming up there in DeFi. What I see always in hindsight, it was inevitable. That's, I think, one of my favorite sentences in blockchain, because it's so obvious that actually this is happening, that people buy Bitcoin, people speculate on stuff, and suddenly you come up with staking models. I mean, we from Dash, I think we could say we invented it. We were probably the first one with a masternode network to provide yields on coins. I mean, how did you see the space evolving? Especially we're here talking about regulatory aspects. I think we are coming from a pretty much cowboy industry to a more and more regulated world, but it feels still a little bit cowboy. What do you think?
Yeah, so for example, from the launchpad side, I would say that we have seen projects from from bottom to top, let's say it like this. And there are a lot of cowboys, to be honest, but also there are a lot of promising and very mature projects that are actually coming from with a professional backgrounds or industry experience and trying to connect these to different kind of worlds, from traditional finance to this booming DeFi or crypto space. I personally think that there are still a lot of things to do, not only in terms of the regulations, but in technology side, because the barrier from technical standpoint is still too high for a normal person to come into DeFi or crypto.
What do you think?
I think I really like the way you set it up. It's inevitable, and yeah, we believe that DeFi products and services are going to be a part of all of the banks and financial institutions in the next decade. And of course, that's the genesis idea of our platform. We wanted to bring banking and DeFi together, create a hybrid CeFi DeFi platform that takes the best of both worlds and proves to everyone that you can be regulated, compliant, and still provides the services and the products that other DeFi projects that are taking a more anonymous or cowboy, as you guys called it, approach to things.
Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned basically 3 points that I want to dissect a little bit. One is good projects versus bad projects. I guess that comes a lot down to, is it a good business model, or is it even a business model, or is it just a Ponzi scheme? The second one is, you mentioned especially the user side of things, like CeFi, DeFi. I guess that's all about making life easier for users that did not figure out private keys on MetaMask. And the third aspect is all the regulatory part, which I just discussed on the other conference, probably the part that I always get a little bit nervous because we can do stuff so fast without lawyers.
I thought you were going to say excited about.
I'm from a coin formerly known as dark coin. You can imagine where I stand on this side of things. No, with regulation, my point is I do stuff fast, right? And kind of lawyers always make you more problems than you have. For me, there's actually the biggest gap in regulation is technology is coming so fast, the regulators are always behind, and we are always discussing things that's like, man, that was like 2017 that we discussed that, and now you're discussing stable coins or something. It's like, wow, it's like I have a content writer. She's in Nigeria. I hired her in 24 hours after I got her application, and I paid her after 48 hours. Try to figure that out, give her a work permit in Asia, and blah, 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 right? Nobody's doing that. So maybe let's start with this boring topic then. What do you think about the regulation? Where are we standing, and what's the next step? What are we regulating?
I think you were very optimistic when you said we're talking about 2017 topics. Try 1940s for regulation, because that's our reference point. I think I agree with you that the regulatory framework is always behind. Unfortunately, it doesn't move as quickly as the technology does. Where I stand is I want to see regulation that enables innovation. So I like having a framework to work within and clearly define, okay, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. It helps future problems. However, it has to support, that's the key here, any innovation, any new ideas, for the ability for the builders to actually create the future. If it's like the future has to look like 1930s, it does not work. And then, I'm on your camp where let's move and build stuff because we're never going to go back to 1930s or 40s. So why are we putting a frame of reference there? Why aren't we regulating for 2022? And so we work very closely with our regulators, but also different governments to educate them. I think education is going to be the fuel that allows them to move faster too. That, and of course, voting the right people in so they do have the same mindset. Like, imagine your regulators actually thinking like you, like things need to be done in 24 hours. How do we enable that? How can we make that compliant? And I think that's the change we need to see for the industry to flourish and not constantly butt heads with regulation and government officials.
Yeah, I think I just learned it. I mean, never ask yes and no questions. Just ask how questions. How can we instead of, can we? What do you think? Where we stand on regulation and how can we improve?
Yeah, I agree. So everything should move a little bit faster, in my opinion, as well. However, at least here, I'm European, so I feel that all the information that is, for example, given to decision makers here in Europe, they are to some extent very outdated or doesn't make sense. I think I just last week read some ridiculous article how Europeans wanted to, European politicians, people in Brussels wanted to ban Bitcoin and Ethereum because it's not European registered company, and I think they have lost kind of the idea of the.
Is this like China banning Bitcoin since 2014?
Yes, the same over here now in Europe. But I don't understand where are this information coming. Are they so uneducated? Or what is the problem? But obviously you cannot register Ethereum to European Union, right?
They didn't receive the fax.
No.
And I'm not kidding you. I mean, I'm German. And it's so embarrassing to have a German bank and to do bank transfer there. You just get such a headache. I mean, we have seen PSD2 coming up, right? And I was working in banking innovation, like trying to help German and European banks to get rid of SAP core banking systems. And I mean, they hire an army of 500 people sitting there just to get PSD2, the Payment Service Directive of the EU, going, that basically forces every bank to open their APIs to interchange information and to enable all these financial service providers to kind of go in and out of bank accounts to pull information via API. I mean, just this simple regulatory requirement took the bank like almost 10 years, and they were like really sweating the hell, because they couldn't figure it out. You mentioned that you want to be compliant. Where are you compliant, and how are you approaching it? Are you going EU? Are you going Bermuda? What's the approach?
We don't want to be. We are licensed, regulated, and compliant. Our banking license is from Dominica, so we report to the Central Bank of Caribbean, and it's British territory, so we're fully integrated with that ecosystem. And our money manager license is from BVI, again, British territory. Before the Brexit, we thought it would be a good global reach to have the licensed and regulatory environment set there, and to this day that allows us to provide all our services globally. So far so good.
Yeah, it's clever. And maybe if we switch this to the user side, I mean, it's great that you have this regulation. But is that able to create trust with users? What do you think? How should we approach easy solutions and trustworthy solutions for the end user? Is BVI the right way to go there?
Yeah, it could be. Of course, the projects or companies, they need to protect themselves as well. So there isn't anything to use if the company is not protected. We are incorporated in BVI. It's working for us very well. Now let's see with the incubator physical lab that is coming to Atlanta. It's a little bit different. Depending, of course, on what kind of services you are providing, I think then it's better to rely on real legal advice where to incorporate.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, is it DeFi or is it just a Ponzi? It's kind of, how to, me as an end user, what's kind of your tip for anyone to vet the project and to see if it's, just another Ponzi?
Well, so that depends. How do you want to define a Ponzi? If you make a lot of money, is it a Ponzi for you?
Well, if I'm late, or
yeah,
if I'm early, that's the question.
And if you're losing, of course, it's Ponzi. This is what we saw with the UST and collapse of Terra Luna. So it's a little bit, in my opinion, gray area.
It's true. But I mean, Terra Luna is a great example, right? It worked. It was somewhat a very noisy company, sharpshooting everybody who was a critic of it. But I mean, it was kind of an open secret that this version of a stable coin is a very tricky one, right? And what's your opinion? When do your red flags go up?
I think it's relatively simple. For me, if I can understand how the value creation happens and where it's coming from, it's obviously not the right project for me. We looked into Terra just to integrate it and UST as an asset to include on our platform and passed on it because we just couldn't figure out how everyone expecting to make 20% APY for the rest of their lives could be financed. I mean, there wasn't an economic model. So I always tell people, if you don't understand how it works, it's probably the wrong project for you, and maybe the right project for someone else. But I personally pass on those. And going back to is it Ponzi? Is it a scam? Again, I think a lot of people get very emotional in their ability to analyze any opportunity. They see 4,000% APY, and immediately they're like, I'm gonna ape in because that's the future, and I'm gonna 40x my money in a month. That's I guess human nature. But once you've been burned a couple of times and got your real world education, I think it's much more simple to see if something doesn't add up. And you can't figure out what's going on, you're going to be pretty much, the sheep, not the wolf in that situation.
Very wise words. Yeah, I think it's funny enough. It's pretty obvious that the 4,000% API is somewhat.
You would be surprised. We had people actually dissing our returns on our platform because it wasn't in the thousands. They were upset, like, you guys don't know what you're doing. How are you a DeFi platform and you're only giving like 20%, 18%? And I'm like, I guess we're losers. And you know something that we don't. But it turns out that that's not the case.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, there are some projects that I was fascinated that even have these APIs. I guess like all the DeFi 2.0 ones where I still trying to have my head around them, like Olympus and Mago and all these. Because I'm coming from the project owner side and really trying to figure out these kind of liquidity models. I think we have transitioned to a world where you come from, I mean, as a project owner, you want to list at a DEX, you pay a high price, and then ongoing you pay the market makers, and it's not cheap at all, right? So suddenly you kind of say, wow, we can list at Pancake or Uniswap or something. It's going to be for free, but no, it's not for free. You start with hundreds of thousands in initial liquidity, and after you put the initial liquidity, you you give free coins that you call yield farming, right? Which is basically renting other people's money. And the moment you stop giving them rewards, money moves on, right? And your LP is dropping, your coin is dropping, everything is going bad, right? So, what's the solution for that? I'm still trying to figure my head around that. And it seemed DeFi 2.0 could be an answer, but then, crash happened.
As a founder myself, I don't think there's any solution to secondary markets. People want you to be on secondary markets. They don't understand the cost of it. They think it's free. It's like, hey, list here, hey, list there. Why aren't you listed there? They don't even think what the ongoing cost of being listed and sustaining that asset in that marketplace is. And again, at some point, you just need to look at what makes most sense from a business perspective and cut out the noise. I think no project needs more than one tier 1 exchange and 2 DEXs and maybe a couple of tier 2s, and that's it. If you're on more than 5 exchanges, you can stop, because unless you're several billion-dollar market cap, those secondary markets are going to be more than sufficient to handle your volume. And we're on 16 of them, so I know, it's just, I don't think there's an automated low-cost option to secondary markets, at least not in the forms that we've created them so far.
These are very wise words. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, the overall DeFi market, in the size of market, it's still too small. So, for example, from our IDO projects that we helped to launch, if at the launch date they have 3,000 wallets, 3,000 users, it's a successful project. But when you compare 3,000 users to any kind of traditional wallet applications, they are nothing in terms of, it's just like you don't get any funding from a single VC if you have 3,000 users. But in our small crypto DeFi world, it's a huge success.
Yeah, it's a funny point you mentioned. Users, it's not the criteria for raising money these days, huh? But yeah, you're right. But at the end of the day, you need to raise a lot of money because you need to cater to these secondary markets, and I think that's in my opinion, it's one of the hardest nuts to crack in the whole market for everybody who's raising funds and who's rolling out a project. I see a lot of them failing because they didn't figure out token economy on kind of what is happening the moment you release your token. It's like you let your baby walk, it's running against the wall, or it's falling down the stairs if you don't hold its hand, right? That's kind of the situation I see.
Yeah, and I don't think the failing is alone for token economics. There can be really good engineered projects as well. However, I usually refer to this DeFi as a subculture. It's that if you want to do something in this industry, you really need to be part of that culture. And you need to get the backing from that subculture that is operating over there. And I think, so we have had really successful projects that are so-called degens, if the word is familiar. And they do well because they know the game, how to play in this degen world, keep the community happy, provide them news, and so on. Even if someone would be saying that the token economics are Ponzi, but they do it well because they know the game.
I like that very much. DJ Degen, you have to be a little famous in there. I think we're almost out of time. Oh, we have 5 more minutes. That's good. Okay. Any questions from the audience about regulatory stuff, about rolling out a project, anything you guys are interested in? All right, then let's just talk a little bit more about this world. What I find also funny is another thing. We're in Monaco now, and everybody's talking, we're like asset managers, and we're bringing everything to the blockchain now. I feel I've heard this many times. And the last years. And the truth is, we crypto people are, what I said, we're extremely fast. And frankly, we don't care. Regulatory stuff, in my opinion, as a project owner, is the thing you have to deal with. And you're gonna deal with it because, you don't want to go to prison, right? You either do it anonymously, like you said, and doing it anonymously is a friggin' pain because there's so much to consider and only one mistake and you de-anonymize yourself. Plus you have, of course, like public ledgers that, that can be traced back to you if you know how this stuff works, right? So the alternative is, you just go for regulations as they are. But I'm in Thailand, I'm based in Bangkok. I see, if you have to pay taxes in the States, you are in Puerto Rico. If you hold a European passport and cannot get out of it, you are in Lisboa right now. If you, don't want to get vaccinated and have enough crypto, you're in Dubai. And if you're a crypto philanthropist, you're in Thailand. So that's kind of my version of the world. But what do you think? Where's the next movement going? How are the cards being remixed?
I don't know where the next movement is, but I think you can, to a certain extent, embrace regulation and instead of trying to skirt around it, guide it. That's been our approach. Try to influence the decision makers in a positive way so they make the right decisions. Of course, that's the path less traveled and more difficult, but I think it's starting to yield some fruits and results for the community. As far as where you should be as a crypto entrepreneur or philanthropist, as you call it, I don't know. I think there's probably going to be some new, I don't know if it's going to be good or bad, but some new legislation coming up throughout the world. And based on that, that's going to change. Like Portugal is trying to now change its stance on crypto and taxation. That's going to probably change the winds a little bit. Liechtenstein was a favorite for the longest. Now it's not. Malta was very promising. It turned out to be not so much. Things change. So if you're trying to constantly be ahead of the regulatory waves, then I guess you'll be moving soon again when it comes to Thailand. But we try to put roots somewhere and really work with the system in place so to make it better. Because otherwise, eventually, you're going to run out of jurisdictions to hop to when they come together and say, we're all banning Bitcoin now, deal with it. And then, that's going to be fun times.
Yeah, I agree, and I guess there's two layers to it, right? One is the individual, where am I tax resident, and how do I deal, with my stuff, and where do I set up a company? So I agree, especially with the last one, we have been a lot getting conversations started with regulators and realize they're also just humans, they just don't know stuff, right? They just, they want to learn. What is your approach? Where do you think is a good, for individuals and for companies, what is a kind of tip that you would give?
Yes, in general, I support regulation. I know that there are some other views around this as well, who wants to keep the free cowboy world going over there. However, like I mentioned some minutes ago, the industry, what we have now, is too small. It's not sustainable. It needs new capital. It needs investors, users. You cannot build billion-dollar games in Metaverse or DeFi products unless you get the masses.